Special edition of Daily Delivery. Chris Hine here with me. I'm Michael Rand. Chris, got to admit, I didn't think the next time that we talked for this podcast would be to talk about the firing of Gersson Rosas 6 days before the opening of training camp. But Chris, here we are. We both know better than to expect anything less, I guess, than chaos from the Timberwolves. Let me just start with how did we get to this point where, like I said, less than a week before their opening camp, a very awkward time to be changing your leadership, they decide to make this move.
Right. So everything that I have heard, this has been building for a while. There has been some tension, some discord, low morale, kind of whatever term you want to use between Gersson Rosas and the rest of the front office and the rest of the organization. In August, there was a chance for kind of everybody to be in Vegas together. And at that point, I think some of the discord and dysfunction, or whatever you want to call it, became clear to other parts of the organization. And it culminated with Glenn Taylor making this decision kind of in conjunction with Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez to make a change here before the season starts. Now, we'll see what comes to light in coming days here. I don't think this story is necessarily done. I'm sure we're going to see more details coming out because that's just kind of the nature of these things. But in general, that's kind of the overarching theme here is I think that there was just a lot of tension. Gersson, and the staff, some of the staff didn't, necessarily get along great in terms of, maybe how he treated them. And that's kind of where we're at here.
So doesn't sound like it was necessarily any one specific thing. And it kind of reminds me of, the Wild a couple of years back when they let go of Paul Fenton, their general manager, not long before the season started, where it's kind of a cumulative effect. It was relationships and less about his job performance. That said, did you get the sense that job performance played into that? It played into this decision at all?
I don't think it was necessarily job performance and on-court performance. I think it was more the culture that was being set. And the irony is that when Rosas was hired, it was all about culture and player-centric culture and family and this and that. And, you find out behind the scenes, it was the opposite in some ways. So, in a lot of ways. So, I don't think on-the-court performance necessitates a move a month or a week before training camp starts. On-the-court performance would necessitate a move earlier. And I think maybe the timing of summer league and all that, some people might ask, like, why not just, make the move before free agency starts or the draft starts? And I think the summer league played a part in that, in just kind of helping the team gather some information on this front. So I think the a little bit of it is kind of in the interim period between the time where Lowry and Rodriguez officially became aboard in late July to now.
It seems like the roster, like you said, is pretty well set, and Gersson Rosas had a pretty large hand, obviously, as the president of basketball operations. He was in charge of assembling this entire team, this direction that they're headed, the Patrick Beverley trade, the Ricky Rubio trade, things like that. So, as we think about that, what are some of the kind of immediate ramifications here? We see, the first and foremost thing I think of is, seeing Karl Anthony Towns basically tweet in surprise, essentially, like, what's going on here? What do you make of Towns' reaction to this, and how do you think that will play out in the coming days?
Yeah, so obviously I think it took a lot of people by surprise, even if, some people knew, of these kind of this strained relationship. So, I going forward, you're going to have Sachin Gupta in charge of the day-to-day operations. The team is going to have a wider search. That doesn't mean Gupta is not going to be a part of it. He very well could be. So he was number 2 under Gersson Rosas, brought him in from from Detroit by way of Philly and Houston previously. They worked together in Houston. So he's going to be handling the day-to-day operations. As that relates to a potential pursuit of Ben Simmons, who knows? I don't think we know that at this point in time. We'll see as the days unfold here. But yeah, this is obviously taking a lot of people by surprise, because it was just last week that Gersson Rosas was there. All smiles at a press conference to introduce some of the guys they traded for this summer, some of the guys they re-signed. And you wouldn't know that, any of this was happening by looking at like the video of that press conference, for instance. So, yeah, it's a surprise, but as you get to kind of learn things that were going on behind the scenes, it doesn't seem as quite a shock.
A couple more things, Chris. You mentioned Sachin Gupta. Any sense of what we can expect from him, depending on how long he's in charge? But he's going to have decisions to make. Like you said, Ben Simmons is a looming question, and it's a fair question of whether that was a Gersson Rosas pursuit and almost obsession, because he was a big fan of big trades and bold moves, or how might Sachin Gupta treat his time in charge?
Well, I think Sachin has a very strong background in analytics. The line on his resume that people like to point out is he was the kind of the developers of the ESPN trade machine back when he used to work there a while back.
I was just on it today, making one of my cockamamie Ben Simmons trades.
Exactly. So I think, and he's done a good job at kind of putting trades together throughout his career, multi-team trades, good use of provisions in the salary cap and things like that. So he is a very analytical, he can put together a complicated trade, and he's done it before. So, along those lines, if the direction of this team is to potentially trade for Ben Simmons, and that's what they want to do, I think Gupta has the ability to orchestrate a deal, especially a deal like that, which everything I've heard would have to be at least a 3-team deal, because I don't think there's a good matchup of assets between the Wolves and the 76ers. So you might need a third team in there. And he had a big part in the 4-team trade that happened 2 years ago that involved Robert Covington going out and Malik Beasley, Juancho Hernan-Gomez, and a first-round pick coming back. He helped orchestrate that. So, yeah, again, if the complicated trade needs to happen, Gupta can be the guy to put it together.
Last thing, you felt like there was a little bit of momentum last season, and changing a president of basketball operations is different than changing a head coach. It's different than trading away or trading for a star player. Probably has less immediate on-court impact. That said, perception-wise, what do you think this does to a Timberwolves team that is entering a pretty significant year and maybe had a little bit of momentum going last season and looking into this season?
It's tough to say. It really is. How does this affect the psyche of an organization, of a team? Chris Finch and Gersson Rosas go back a long way. Chris Finch is still the coach today. I haven't heard anything that his job is in any danger or anything like that. So, this team carries forward with Chris Finch as its coach, Sachin Gupta handling the day-to-day operations. And as for the on-court performance, anybody's guess. I really don't know what to expect. This is my fourth. This will be my fourth training camp that I'll be covering as the Timberwolves beat writer here. And I really didn't think it could get any more chaotic than the first one I covered, which was the Jimmy Butler training camp. And here we are. They managed to. They did it. They outdid themselves.
Timberwolves always have a habit of outdoing themselves. We'll see where this story goes. Follow Chris's evolving coverage on StarTribune.com and in the newspaper. Chris Hine, thanks for taking the time on Daily Delivery. And next time we talk, maybe we can talk about what's happening on the court and not necessarily off the court.
Thanks, Mike. Talk to you later.
Bonus edition of Daily Delivery, special delivery, we like to call it. Chip Scoggins with me now after talking to Chris Hine, Timberwolves beat writer. Chip, your reaction to the news that the Timberwolves have essentially fired Gersson Rosas their president of basketball operations, less than a week before the start of training camp.
Only the Timberwolves. Are they ever going to be not dysfunctional, Mike? I mean, this is it's fitting for them because it's just here you have a president of basketball operations that has basically detonated your roster over the last 2 years, completely overhauled it, fired a coach midseason to bring in his own guy, and a week before training camp, and you think that they're building towards something and they're engaged in these Ben Simmons trade talks, and all of a sudden you have this abrupt news that you're going a different direction. And I'm leading with this in my column, and that it's telling that your franchise player tweets out WTF, and that's it. And that, I don't think you can say it any more appropriately than what Karl Anthony Towns put in that acronym.
It's shocking. I mean, and again, Chris Hine and I talked a little bit about, some of the stuff that was maybe going on behind the scenes. So if you're a little bit more plugged in, maybe it's not stunning, but the timing of it, remember 2-3 years ago, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 years ago, when the Wild essentially did this not too long before the start of training camp, when they got rid of Fenton, and they brought in, eventually brought in Guerin. When that happened, it was just like, it was more the timing of it than anything. But you look at Rosas' tenure, there've been some ups, some downs, but you thought he was going to get kind of this swing to see if they could get this going. Do you think performance wise, this was a move that was warranted based on what you'd seen from what they've been able to do so far in his tenure?
Well, no, not if you're just talking about nothing that's happening behind the scenes, but if you're just talking about the basketball and reshaping the roster, of course, you're going to give a guy more time to see if his plan can work. Now, I thought this was going to be the pivotal year that they needed to make a big leap forward, both for his job and also for Karl Anthony Towns. Like, the clock is ticking, and you needed to see big growth last year. I think you made all these changes to the roster with an idea, with a plan that what it's going to be, and so you have to see that. We saw that at the end of last year. It was like, tank, don't tank, tank, don't tank. No, they wanted to see this group together finally, and you saw some signs of promise right down the stretch, albeit no pressure on the team, but finally they were together. And so you're thinking, okay, now let's see what it does this year. And so that's why the timing of this, but this has to be based on what Chris Hine has told you, and just other instances we've seen with this with Paul Fenton. Obviously, there was his management style just was abrasive, and ownership, Craig Leopold, just felt like, I'm not going to go any further with this before it inflicts more damage. And clearly it had to be something along those lines here, because you wouldn't stick through a guy all through off season if it was just performance. I mean, you'd have made a decision right after the season and moved on. And so, but still, even that, it's just bizarre. I mean, it must have been so bad behind the scenes that we weren't privy to, or that wasn't public yet. I'm sure it'll come out now, but it's, here you go, starting over. I mean, what's the plan now? What's the philosophy?
That's the thing. I mean, Rosas made a lot of off-season moves. I mean, not a ton, but like he made trades. You still got the aftershock of the D'Angelo Russell trades. They didn't have draft picks this year, but they brought in Patrick Beverley, traded Ricky Rubio, and we've been talking for months about, are they going to get Ben Simmons? I don't know. Have no idea where that stands right now, both from a organizational philosophy standpoint in terms of, who's going to be making that decision right now. Does that pursuit remain as hot? And, this is the roster that he has essentially built, and they will have to carry that roster into the season. So where does that leave them competitively this year and beyond, especially when Karl Anthony Towns just tweeted, like you said, WTF, and he's going into a pretty pivotal year where he'll be 2 years out from free agency after this season. That's a time when players ask for trades, Chip.
Well, that's the thing. I've said all along that this was going to be a big year for him, because no matter what a player tells you about, they love it here, this and that, if they're not winning, he's going to get sick of being here. And he's going to say, you know what? All the dysfunction, all the change, all the turmoil that had gone on in my career, I want to be done with it. I want to move away. I want to try something fresh. His tweet tells you he's not far from feeling that way. Now we'll see who they bring in, kind of what they do to smooth that over. And the other thing we don't know, is this a Glenn Taylor move? Is this a Mark Lowry, Alex Rodriguez move? combined. I assume it was a team decision. I don't think it'd just be one side or the other. But, I don't know what kind of relationship Towns had with Gersson. They're close, not close, whatever. But clearly he was caught off guard by this based on his tweet. And so there's going to be some damage control and some sells to him to explain where this is going and how they view the future to convince him that he needs to be part of it. But again, it's just like, so you're starting over again? Is the new guy going to be able to make his? Are you going to have someone who had the same philosophical view of how the game should be played, how this roster is constructed, or are you going to give it to someone outside who has another view of how things should be run, and you're going to rip up the roster again? It's just, they're just so dysfunctional. Honestly, they're just completely. Will they ever get it right? I think that's my question.
Well, they haven't gotten it right for a long time. I mean, it's, when history repeats itself over and over again, and it was Glenn Taylor's name on the news release in which Timberwolves was misspelled, by the way. But do you?
Which I point out in my column. Yes.
Yes. It's a minor point, but again, probably something you want to get right. But when it has happened over and over again, you do wonder when are they going to be able to get it right? And they've made a lot of just puzzling moves timing wise. Even if you think back to, bringing Chris Finch in the middle of the season last year, which, is defensible when you consider, okay, it did get better under him. Maybe you wanted to give him kind of a running start before you got to this season, but just a lot of things that they've done have been curious from a standpoint. Maybe curious is a kind word. And it's just, it does speak to just when it seemed like maybe there was a little bit of momentum from last year, you've got this dropping right before training camp.
And that's the thing. Glenn Taylor, and because he's been the owner through it, has empowered Gersson Rosas to do a lot.
Right.
I mean, he's, as I said, he's detonated the roster. I mean, think about how much this roster has turned over in him.
Everybody but Towns and Okogie.
Their entire style of play, analytics, the whole philosophy of what they want to be. He fired a coach who Glenn Taylor loves, and he allowed him to do it in midseason and take all that criticism the way he went about it. And then you fire him, a week before
the season.
It's like, okay. I mean, was it you let him do all this? I mean, just really turn the organization upside down in a way that he felt like was going to build this team into a competent franchise. And then before you even get to the point of really knowing where it's leading, you fire him. And so it must have been so bad behind the scenes, is all I can say, because to get to the point you make this decision this early in Gersson's career and this close to a season, it had to be a point of no return, right?
Yeah. And we should point out too, this is not the same as firing a head coach. So
no.
When you get rid of a president, a guy in charge of personnel, when the personnel is largely in place, although the Simmons thing does complicate things, if that was looming over them, there is a chance that this doesn't have as much basketball impact, at least immediately, as we might think. It's not the same as a coach bringing in an entirely new playbook, starting over from that standpoint, but it's more of a organizational direction thing that it is.
Yes.
What are they going to do on the court in 4 weeks that might be different?
Well, and even when Finch came in here, it wasn't like you just install a brand new playbook. This was, think about how much change Gersson brought in terms of just philosophy. Shoot to three, right? And just the way they play and the type of players they're trying to bring in here, and how much he shaped the roster because of that. So this is a whole 30,000 foot big picture philosophical change. And who's to say that the next guy is going to have the same type view of this roster that he did? And so that's why you have to wonder where Karl-Anthony Towns' head's going to be when he shows up to camp. Is he going to say, you know what, I'm tired of this. I'm really tired of this. I want to go somewhere else. Would not surprise me, because we see it all the time in this league. Maybe he won't. Maybe he'll buy in and believe whatever they tell him. But it wouldn't be surprising to me, but just based on how much turmoil and just unsettled things he's had to go through in his career here.
Well, I was going to ask you that. I mean, how do you think this does play out? What's the logical endpoint? Because, they're projected to be, the 33, 35 win team this season. And that was before this. And again, don't know how much of an impact that has on basketball right away. If the roster is pretty much set, that is what it is. But, this is another layer, I suppose, in the notion that if things don't go that well this year and they are kind of that 33, 34 win team that the betting markets suggest they would be, and they wouldn't make the play-in tournament with that kind of record. Do you think Karl-Anthony Towns is here this time next season if that happens?
Yeah, I don't know. And you're right. The on-court changes probably doesn't much, assuming Chris Finch is fine. I assume he's going to be the coach because day-to-day and just how they play, this shouldn't affect that.
Chris Finch has got to be like, what's going on, though, too?
Well, yeah, for him, it's like, I don't know if they approached him or involved him in the discussions, too, or if this blindsided him. But, yeah, anytime you get a new boss, you're probably like, what does this mean for me? Because we all know GMs or presidents, whatever you want to phrase it, they like to have their guy. And so I don't know if they're going to stay internal, if they're going to promote Gersson's number 2, or if they're going to look outside. It's still so early in the process. I don't know where that's going. But no, big picture, if they don't make the playoffs again, I would say nothing would surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if, because him and Russell are so close that if they couldn't move both of them, maybe he's here. But it also wouldn't surprise me if Towns just says, where is this going? And I don't want to spend my whole career surrounded by dysfunction. I want to go somewhere else where there's a fresh start and just try something different. So I wouldn't be surprised either way, to be honest with you. But he's clearly, again, based on that tweet, not happy or caught off guard by it.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot to unpack in the coming days. I'm sure we'll have media day on Monday for this team. We'll get to hear from a lot of the players. I'm sure they'll get their messaging in order at that point, and try to keep the focus on the court. But I guess the long story short is a year that I was curious about in a lot of ways. It just throws a whole new layer onto it. And I really do wonder what the long-term impact of this is going to be.
I do too. Yeah. I mean, this was definitely a pivot point year, I thought, for the regime and for the best player. I felt like if you didn't make, or if they didn't show and don't show tangible signs of progress, like, okay, I can see where this is going. You can see the improvement. You can see where they're building towards. If we don't see that, I thought it'd be, I thought Gersson might be in trouble then, and I wouldn't be surprised if Towns said that's enough for me. They've already removed one, and so we'll see how Towns views it.
Good stuff, Chip. We'll do this, catch up with you on a less emergency basis down the road, but thanks everybody for listening to this special edition of Daily Delivery.